And hello, everybody. Vasi Vada Party, Charlie O with you. This is the Make the Money and Run podcast for Friday, October 1st. This is the Friday Football Show. Thanks, everybody on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter for joining us live. If you missed any of it, you can, if you missed any of the live broadcasts, you can download and subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Google, iHeart, Spotify, and SoundCloud. We're here every Mondays, Thursdays, and Fridays. If you just missed our baseball show, thanks for that. You can download that as well, too. We're getting ready for the final weekend in Major League Baseball. But right now, it's football. Don't forget, we get our selections out and our updated news every day by 6 o'clock Eastern. On the weekends, it's by 11 a.m. and by noon on Sundays for kickoffs on Saturdays and Sundays, as we've got exciting football coming up this weekend. Conference football in the NCAA finally, and week 4 of the NFL, we get a feel for all the teams and how they are going right now, thanks to the Britannia Arms for their sponsorship. Silicon Valley's longest-serving British pub and restaurant, celebrating 40 years of the best British food and drink. BritanniaArmsDeanza.com, 408-252-7262. Charlie, how?
It's great, man. It seems like I just saw you.
Well, I want to make sure nothing changed between then and now, so we'll just go from there. All right, let's start real quick. We'll get to the football. We got a lot to talk about between the NFL and with college. The Cincinnati Bengals last night, 7.5-point favorites, 50.5 the total against the Jacksonville Jaguars. They get a game-winning field goal, the second game-winning field goal at the buzzer this year to improve to 3-1 as they beat Jacksonville last night, 24-21. Jacksonville now 0-4. Cincinnati 3-1, leading the division right now. The Ravens are 2-1. The Steelers are 1-2. I believe is 2-1 also, right? If I'm not mistaken. Cleveland is 2-1 also.
Yeah.
And they are half game back of the Bengals, who are in first place. And I can't remember the last time I said the Cincinnati Bengals were in first place, except for week 1 and some years when they got a win. But this is week 4 for them, and they get the win. The last 2 number 1 draft picks, overall draft picks, Trevor Lawrence and Joe Burrow, they didn't disappoint. I thought Trevor Lawrence played a pretty good game for Jacksonville last night, including running in a touchdown. And Joe Burrow has got some talent on that offensive receiver side. Jamar Chase and Boyd. Mixon ran the ball really well, and their defense played really well. And they've got a good pass rush, and they've got good linebacker play. Their secondary play was pretty good, but the pass rush kind of nullifies any deficiencies that the secondary has. Charlie, was an interesting game to watch, 14-0 Jacksonville. Then the game got tied at 14-14, and then Jacksonville took a lead at 21-14 early in the fourth quarter. Cincinnati came back to tie it up. I know you and I were both on Cincinnati laying the 7.5 points. That's probably a lot of people were, because the Jacksonville Jaguars, frankly, have not been very good this year. But this was clearly their best game, and maybe something clicked between week 3 and week 4 in terms of practice habits or something getting ready for them, because I guess the more cohesion you have, that's with anything in life. Obviously, they look like they were a formidable team last night, the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Well, I think we started to see a coming out party last night for Trevor Lawrence. I mean, we had been, through those first couple of games, we looked at that and we go, wow, okay, this guy, is this going to be one of those number 1 draft pick bust kind of things? And yet we were holding back on saying that because, it's that typical deal. Great player goes to the worst team. That we always have to factor that in these professional leagues, because you get the best guy goes to the worst team, which never seems fair to me, but that always is the way it goes. But all of a sudden last night, you could see things clicking. And I think, and I know that he had made some comments, they were quoting him on some things. I think he is catching up to the speed of the game and adjusting himself to the speed of what's happening on the field. And you could see last night with his movement, his running, his passing with the runs and everything else. And they weren't able to maintain everything through the fourth quarter. But last night you started to go, they're starting to get it. Now, are they going to the playoffs? Of course not. No, because they don't have enough. They don't have enough around him yet to make that happen. But I think what we saw last night was we saw what he is capable of. And that was exciting. It was exciting. Did we see enough for me to start putting money on Jacksonville? Absolutely not. But I think we're going to see an entertaining team there, and probably enough that we'll stop talking at least for the next 3 or 4 weeks about Urban Meyer going to USC until USC makes him the offer he can't refuse.
Trevor Lawrence, 204 yards, 1 sack for 2 yards lost. Quarterback rating was okay, 82.5. He rushed for 1 touchdown. James Robinson, 18 carries for 78 yards. He had 2 touchdowns, so that accounted for the 3 touchdowns there. Chanot, their receiver, Chanot Jr., looks like a pretty good receiver. 6 catches, 89 yards, 99 yards. And then you got Arnold and Agnew and Maurice Jones Jr. and Austin. I forgot Tavon Austin's still in the league. He's with Jacksonville now there as well. On the other side for Cincinnati, Joe Burrow, 348 yards, 2 touchdown passes, QBR of 71.8. The rating was 132.8 overall. He had a really good game, mixing 67 yards rushing. He had a touchdown. And then Tyler Boyd, 9 catches, 118 yards. Jamar Chase, 6 for 77. And their tight end, Uzoma, who I've seen play a couple of times. He's a pretty good tight end. He took over for Tyler Eifert a couple of years ago after Tyler Eifert had a serious injury. He had 5 catches, 95 yards, and he caught both the touchdown passes from Joe Burrow. So interesting for Cincinnati. Let's take a look at Cincinnati here for a second, Charlie. 3-1 as you see the lines go across the bottom, the ticker lines. We'll have the NFL lines for you, and we'll talk about the games in a second as we break down the divisions. We haven't had a chance to review last week, but let's talk about Cincinnati now. They're 3-1 in the AFC North. They're a half game ahead of Cleveland. And then they've got the Steelers are 1-2. What's going on with the Steelers? I don't know. Maybe they'll turn it around, or maybe this is just going to be one of those years. And then you've got Baltimore, who's 2-1, who needed a record-setting, game-winning field goal by probably the best kicker in the last 20 years, and Justin Tucker.
My fantasy kicker.
I've had him for a lot of years on my fantasy kicker, but 66 yards. Talk about clearing points in fantasy football. But the Detroit Lions are the Detroit Lions, and I guess that's the way they lose games, even in bad luck. If they didn't have bad luck, they wouldn't have any luck because it went doink straight up and came down just behind the crossbar for the game winner, and that's a big blow for them would it be 1-2 as opposed to 2-1 in this division, especially if Cincinnati's getting off to a hot start. All of a sudden, I'm looking forward to a Ravens-Bengals game here in the next few weeks, and never thought we'd see that. I mean, everybody's talking about the Browns and the Steelers, but right now it's the Ravens and the Bengals right now, Charlie.
Yeah, and it was really interesting in that game last night. You talk about Burrow. I think he he had a lousy first half, but what did he have? I think 253 yards in that second half. I mean, they turned it around and made some really, really nice adjustments in that second half, which speaks very well to him and the team, because when you have as bad a first half as they had, a lot of teams would just lay down and have lost that game. And they turned it around and really made it happen. And I think the key for them last night in that game was that goal line stand that they made right at the end of the first half. And I'm not a coach. Okay. And let me just establish the fact that I'm not a coach. But I really felt like Jacksonville going for that touchdown, even though I know they were close, but this is the National Football League. And they had an opportunity to put points up on the board right at the end of the first half with a field goal. And instead, they decided to try to punch that ball in for a touchdown and came away with no points. And I don't think you can do that in the NFL. I think when you have a chance to score, you've got to score no matter what. And ultimately, I think that cost them the game right there. And it gave Cincinnati a chance to regroup, come back. And Joe Burrow's last night, what a second half. And made me, I've been a Burrow's believer anyway, but made me even more of a Burrow's believer.
No doubt. Vasi Vadaparty, Charlie O here. This is the Friday football show, the Make the Money and Run podcast, hitting the AFC North right now. Talked about the Ravens a little bit. They got the field goal from Justin Tucker, but they did not look very good against the Lions defense that actually played really well against Lamar Jackson. They just could not get anything going. Of course, the 4th and 19 was the one that catapulted them to even have a shot at the 66-yard field goal. The Cleveland Browns are 2-1. They dismantled my Bears last week. 8 sacks. Justin Fields, and I'm sure people have seen the Dan Orlovsky video go viral this week of ripping Matt Nagy, having no plan for Nagy, etc. The protection of Justin Fields, everything like that. The bottom line is there was bad offensive line protection. They didn't chip anybody. You got Clowney on one side. You got Myles Garrett on the other side, and the net result was 4.5 sacks for Myles Garrett and 8 sacks overall of a young quarterback in Justin Fields. And really, it was close for a while. It was 13-6 going into the second half. And then that fourth quarter, Cleveland just turned it around, and they just went after Justin Fields. 8 sacks and a 26-6 win. And then, of course, Pittsburgh lost last week to the Raiders, I believe, no, that was week 2 that they lost to the Raiders. I forgot who Pittsburgh played last week, but they were we'll get to that in a second. In fact, you know what? I'll look it up right now. But talk about the Cleveland Browns and the AFC North here, Charlie, a little bit.
Well, the Browns are off to a pretty good start. We'd be surprised if they weren't. They were predicted to be the team that would win that division. So we thought that they would be good. But who knows what's going to happen there? The Browns always seem to be in turmoil. I don't know why the Browns can't settle. They just always seem to be in turmoil. Should Mayfield be the quarterback? What is Beckham going to do? Blah, 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 blah. I don't understand why that team can't get settled. And I think until they are able to get an organization that can settle down, they're going to be a team that's always going to be maybe outside looking in, because I don't know that you can have that much turmoil in your organization and ultimately be successful. When you look at Cincinnati and say they have more stability than Cleveland, seriously. At this point, don't you feel like Cincinnati's more stable than Cleveland?
Zach Taylor's come in the last 3 years. He's established a culture. They knew what they were going after.
Exactly.
The defense. I saw them play 2 years ago live in person when they were not a very good team, but they had the developings of a pass rush and a running game with Mixon finally coming into his own. Cleveland has yet, to me, have to find an identity, because Baker Mayfield, they're a run-first team, and sometimes I think Stefanski, a great coach, and they had a great year last year in his first year, but I think for the most part, I think he believes in the running game. But I think at some point that Baker Mayfield has to realize that it's equal distribution. It's not him throwing the ball all over the place. They don't have any receivers right now. Landry was out. Beckham was not a factor last week as well, too. So we'll see how they go. They've got the Vikings this weekend on the road. They're in Minnesota. Minnesota's played better the last few weeks. They got the win last week. Yep. Against Seattle. And then the Steelers, by the way, the Steelers lost to the Bengals last week. So that's right. That's where their game was. Cincinnati on their way to 3-1. All right, we move on to the AFC East. Last week, the Buffalo Bills, a 43-21 win. Miami loses to Las Vegas in overtime. And New England beat by the Saints 28-13. And the Jets were blanked by Denver 26-0. We already know the Jets' circumstances they're trying to build up with Zach Wilson right now, who I still like. I just think it's a bad situation right now. And Robert Saleh having a tough time. No Tua Tagovailoa for Miami. Jacoby Brissett comes in and plays well. They forced the overtime against Vegas. Vegas is 3-0. We'll get to the AFC West in a second. But Miami loses that game that they probably should have won. They were up 14-0 in that game. And then Buffalo goes from their big win against Washington last week, 43-21. That opening week against the Steelers, total aberration now, because they look like the best team in the AFC East. It's hard to go undefeated, and something happened. Something didn't click with them on opening weekend with the Steelers. They've got the Texans this week too, so look for them to go 3-1 as well too. And that point spread is pretty high, as you can see on the bottom ticker. So Charlie, AFC East, the Bills right now, they look to be the best team, not only in the division, but probably in the entire conference.
Yeah, you're right. That first week, who knows? It shouldn't have happened. It did, but it shouldn't have. And now we're seeing the Bills as the Bills should be. Josh Allen blew up this last weekend, and as exactly as he should have. And so, yeah, the Bills may be the best in the AFC, and they're playing the way that they should play. The Dolphins, it's going to be rough for them. New England, it's going to be rough. By the way, is there something big happening with the Patriots this weekend?
I'm not sure.
I keep seeing Belichick show up on Sports Center. I don't know what's going on there. I can't imagine they're not playing that well. And then the Jets, Jets fans, listen, Uncle Charlie. Now I know the expectation was high. You got a new quarterback, you got a new coach, but when you got nothing, when you start with nothing, it takes a while to build. Okay, so don't get down on these guys because it's going to take them a little bit to put things together, but you got the right building blocks. But you can't go from nothing to Super Bowl champion in one season. And yeah, you may only get 1 or 2 wins this year, but they'll turn this around. And Robert Saleh, this guy is a prince. This guy knows football. You've got the right man there. I know speaking to Jets fans, especially in New York and with all the print and everything else, I'm speaking in tongues here, but be patient.
Be patient, he says. Okay. See how that goes for them, but we'll figure it out. The Bills have the Texans this weekend. The Dolphins are going to where are the Dolphins this weekend? The Dolphins have the Colts. The Colts are 0-3. And then the Titans have the New York Jets this weekend. Derrick Henry, we'll get to the AFC South in a second. Derrick Henry, after bad week 1, has turned himself into the NFL's leading rusher, as we saw last weekend with him running all over the Colts. All right, we move on to the AFC South. Speaking of those Titans, Derrick Henry, they beat the Colts last week, 25-16. The Colts 0-3. Titans 2-1 now after their horrible showing against the Cardinals. They've come back. Derrick Henry could not run in week 1. And now the last 2 weeks against Seattle and Indianapolis, he's all of a sudden becomes a league leading rusher now, 356 yards after 3 weeks. And that's pretty good production considering how bad a week 1 it was against Arizona that first week, Charlie. But the Titans right now, we know what Jacksonville did last night. They're 0-4. And then Houston has Buffalo this weekend, so you don't expect them to come back as well, too. And then in the AFC South, we got Indianapolis at 0-3. And they're going to need a win at some point. They got Carson Wentz. Taylor, who knows if Taylor's going to come back on the running back side. Hines has been okay, and they're looking at running backs right now because a collapsed lung is what Jonathan Taylor had last week, and it ended up costing them the game because he was not able to balance out what Wentz. And Wentz has 2 bad ankles, so we have no idea if he's going to play either. Jacob Eason is second on the chart for the Colts right now. So AFC South, as we get to the games, like I said, the Titans will have the Jets. The Colts will have the Dolphins. Jacksonville played last night, and then the Houston Texans are going to take the Buffalo Bills. They're going to take on the Buffalo Bills in Buffalo this weekend. So, not very promising for 3 of the 4 teams right now, but I'd like Tennessee to go through this weekend with the Dolphins, Tennessee with the Jets this weekend on the road. The Colts pretty desperate to go into Miami with no Tua, but the Dolphins at 1-2, they need to keep up if they're going to keep up with the Bills at all. They have any chance with the Bills at all this year, Charlie.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it. I mean, this is the Titans division. I mean, plain and simple. Houston, pretty amazing that they even have a win. Indianapolis, folks, I've got connections in Philly because of our corporate, the corporate radio corporation that I work for. We have sports stations in Philly, and my guys there just told me, look, Carson Wentz is damaged goods. Not that he's not a good guy, not that he wasn't a star, but they said after his initial big major injury, he never came back proper. And they said that's why he was failing in Philadelphia. And they told me when they moved him to Indianapolis, they couldn't believe they made that move. They said not that he's not a nice guy, not that he doesn't have it up here, but physically he's not capable of leading an NFL team. 0-3. 2 sprained ankles. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
He's one of those, you know my term, made of glass. He's one of those made of glass guys at this point, and it's not going to happen. I'm sorry, Colts fans. You know I love you. I've got roots in Indianapolis. I've got cousins in Indianapolis who live and die with the Colts. Sorry, guys.
It'll be interesting to see what happens because I'm sure Frank Reich thought he could probably turn Carson Wentz around after their Super Bowl year. But after that Super Bowl year, it's been a pretty downhill slide for Carson Wentz. Hopefully they'll turn it around and make it somewhat of a division But right now, Tennessee having the best look of that division, what might be the weakest division in the NFL next to the NFC North right now. We move on to the AFC West here on the Friday Football Show for the Make the Money and Run podcast. The Chargers. How about the Chargers? Now, Kansas City probably gave that game away with 4 turnovers, but the Chargers are still a very good team, and I think they're a lot better than what people thought. They're 2-1. They beat Kansas City last week, 30-24 on the road in Kansas City, a place that they have not had any success at all or in the history of the Chargers for all those years. The AFC West on the road has been a minefield for the Chargers to go that way. From the San Diego days, even the good San Diego teams have had trouble in Kansas City. They've had trouble in Oakland when it was the Raiders, and they've had trouble in Seattle back in the early AFC West days when Seattle was there. And they've had trouble in Denver as well, too. San Diego, now Los Angeles has. But Justin Herbert's the real deal. Austin Eckler finally coming into his own. Keenan Allen, he's been there 100 years, but he still looks as effective as anybody out there. And their defense, they've got the pass rush, both on one end. They've got the pass rush going. Their secondary is covering people. They forced 4 Kansas City turnovers last week, 2 interceptions and 2 fumbles. And Kansas City, first of all, in September, they never lose. Now they've lost twice. Mahomes never throws an interception. Now he's thrown 3 in September. Kansas City is 1-2. And here are the Chargers at 2-1. The Raiders have topped the division 3-0 with their overtime win over Miami last week. And then Denver got the blowout win. And Denver, not a lot of people were talking about Denver in that division. They can run the ball. It looks like Teddy Bridgewater is very capable of leading that team. And defensively, and probably the best move that Denver made was not cutting and letting go completely of Von Miller, because he's back and he's playing well. Yeah. And yes, it was the Jets, but 26-0 shutout at home and totally dominated that game. I mean, they were 10.5-point favorites. That's a line where you get in the NFL where you start to get a little tweaky about it, for lack of a better word. But I was not worried about minus 10.5 with Denver last week against the Jets.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, Raiders fans, we're so happy for you. Yeah. We really are. And John Gruden, I still don't like you as a head coach. I really don't. I don't believe in you. You ought to be giving money back. Go back to the booth. But I hope you do well. I really do, because I love you. I love you as a guy. So Broncos fans, wow. And you know what, Vasu, we've always loved Teddy Bridgewater. We've always believed in him. Bridgewater would still be in Carolina if it wasn't for the Sam Darnold thing. I really believe that.
Yeah.
So I mean, it wasn't that they moved him out because they didn't like him. It was just they got a chance to get Sam Darnold. And if I was the GM, I would have made the same move. I mean, that was a long-term move there for that. So Denver having Bridgewater, yeah, I'm not surprised. And Von Miller, I think your point there is well taken. And then the Chargers, yeah, boy, what a difference a coaching change made there. I mean, who would have thought it was there? And they've got a good quarterback who's maturing. They had a good defense, and now that's shoring up. They're getting there. And Kansas City, holy cow!
Yeah.
You know what? I'm worried about Andy Reid. Seriously, I'm worried about Andy Reid. He wound up in the hospital last week after the game, and it was dehydration.
Yeah.
Andy Reid's been under a lot of pressure. First of all, every head coach in the NFL is under a lot of pressure. The lifestyle these guys lead,
yeah,
it's just incredible. I mean, CEOs of major corporations do not lead the pressure lives that these guys lead. I'm serious.
Yeah,
but they don't. But he has, and then I don't want to get into it, but he's had off-field pressures too.
Right.
And Andy's built like I am. I mean, we are not in shape guys. And I'm worried about him as a guy. And is that affecting the coaching staff? Is that affecting everything else? It may be. But right now, Vasu, they don't feel to me like a team that's cohesive, a team that's ready to win their division, a team that's ready to be challenging for a Super Bowl. Do you feel the same way?
Right now, I do, the way they played, because they've never had this scenario happen to them in September. Denver is off to a 3-0 start. The Raiders are off to a 3-0 start. The Chargers are 2-1. Could have been 3-0 because they had that Dallas game. They were ahead in that Dallas game until the second half happened, and Dallas came back and won that game on a last-second field goal. Of course, they could have lost to Washington in week 1 too, but Justin Herbert drove them down. So, I mean, any one of 3 scenarios for the Chargers could put them at 3-0, or 1-2, or 0-3 based on how some of these games were. But last week, that was their best game against Kansas City. They forced Kansas City into turnovers ordinarily that Kansas City does not make. Mahomes, I think they just figured that after last year, I don't know if they believe in their press clippings or not. Patrick Mahomes doesn't seem like that type of guy, but the fact is that they're not playing well. And Edwards-Helaire is running the ball okay, but he fumbled twice. Tyreek Hill fumbled once, and then Edwards-Helaire fumbled, and then Mahomes with the 2 interceptions, including the second one that led to the game-winning drive. They went down 65 yards, and Justin Herbert hit Mike Williams in the end zone for the lead. They are having kicking issues in Los Angeles, though. They missed the extra point, and we saw what happened in San Francisco last week with 37 seconds and no timeouts. They can go down and get a touchdown and probably make the extra point with one of the better kickers. To me, the division, the Raiders right now 3-0, a little glassy right now. I'm still not sold on their defense. Derek Carr's having a great start. They've got a pretty good running game, and it looks like Henry Ruggs is coming into his own a little bit. Darren Waller the last couple of years has been really good. Offensively, they're firing on pretty much all cylinders right now. And Denver's got a really good running game. Melvin Gordon looks like he's found a new home, a permanent home. They don't have Lindsey there anymore. They don't have the three-headed system they've had the last couple of years with Melvin Gordon there. Melvin Gordon had a 65-yard touchdown run last week against the Jets. And then you look at Kansas City and the Chargers right now. I would think the Chargers, when they play, they got a big game. The Chargers and Raiders are going to play Monday night on ESPN. That's going to be a big Monday night game. It's going to be in Las Vegas, and I think I take that back. It's in Los Angeles. It's going to be at SoFi, and they're a 3-point favorite going into that game. And I really believe in the Chargers, and I think we'll know how good the Raiders defense is come Monday night when they go up against a really good quarterback like Justin Herbert. Right now, I don't think the wins that they haven't had a quarterback in Miami. Tua was out. Roethlisberger is not the same, and he might still be injured. And then their week 1, they got a little lucky against Baltimore, but we don't know what kind of quarterback Lamar Jackson is right now because Lamar Jackson seems to be inconsistent coming into this year. And if it wasn't for their defense and their running game a little bit, they might be in a different position than 2-1 and a 66-yard game-winning field goal. They might be in a different position to where they are. The Raiders, Chargers, the Broncos will host the Ravens. That'll be a pretty good game this weekend. And then the Chiefs, speaking of Andy Reid, will go back to Philadelphia this weekend to play the Eagles in Philly. They're a 7-point favorite going into that game as well. All right, we move on to the AFC East. Before we take a break here, we talked about the Buffalo Bills, the best team in the AFC right now. Nobody can tell me otherwise. The aberration against the Steelers. Oh, we already did the AFC East. I'm sorry. We already did the AFC East. So that's the AFC right there in a nutshell. Give me a breakdown on the AFC overall, Charlie.
Well, overall, I'm still liking Buffalo. I really am. I feel good about them. I just think, I think that first week was an aberration, and I think that I think if they continue to play well, they're going to be a team to be dealt with. I'd love to tell Raiders fans that I think this is going to keep going. Raiders fans, I don't think it's going to keep going. I just don't. They're off to a great start. I just don't see that great finish there. I like in that division. Frankly, I like the Chargers. I really do. I think there's something wrong in Kansas City, and I don't I know that the offensive line is a problem there, and that, I mean, when you're using guys on the offensive line that are just linemen that you're subbing in there, that's a problem. And so that's going to be there. And I think Baltimore will get themselves right. Harbaugh, I know a lot of people don't like him because his name's Harbaugh, but he's a formidable coach, and he has a tendency to be able to adjust and get things right there. And I think they will. So I think you've got to continue to watch Baltimore too, because Cincinnati, I can see Cincinnati making the playoffs, but they're not going to the Super Bowl.
No, I'm fascinated by week 4. This is about the time where you get a good feel. This will be 1 quarter of the season done after this weekend. Some interesting scenarios have already been set up. and it's going to be an interesting weekend this weekend. I'll be very interested to see some of these AFC matchups. As we did in the promo, the AFC matchups are going to have some big weeks this week, but right now it is Buffalo. All right, that wraps up the AFC. In 30 seconds, when we come back on the Friday Football Show for the Make the Money and Run podcast with Vasu Vadaparty, Charlie O, sponsored by Britannia Arms of Cupertino, we will hit the NFC. Big doings in the NFC last week in San Francisco, in Los Angeles, in Arizona, and even in Dallas, maybe. We'll have to talk about that when we get back in 30 seconds. This is the Make the Money and Run podcast, Friday Football Show, October 1st, 2021. Vasu and Charlie, your hosts here. This is the Make the Money and Run podcast, Friday Football Show for October 1st, 2021, week 4 of the NFL. Got started last night with the Cincinnati Bengals 24-21 victory over Jacksonville. Big slate of games this week in the NFL. We already discussed the AFC. He's Charlie O. I'm Vasu Vadaparty, sponsored by the Britannia Arms of Cupertino, BritanniaArmsDeanza.com, 408-252-7262. You can keep up with the NFL lines on our bottom ticker this weekend. We know the NFL is where a lot of people make their hay in terms of the wagering and angling aspect of it. We just discussed the AFC. We all like Buffalo. We all like the Chargers. And Cincinnati surprised a few people at 3-1. Pittsburgh the other way at 1-2 as well. All right, let's go to the NFC West. That's a good place to start as any because it's probably the best division in the NFL right now. And is that Matthew Stafford at quarterback for the Rams, Charlie?
I believe that it is.
Okay, Matthew Stafford, formerly of the Detroit Lions, not really having a good reputation as a winning quarterback, comes into a situation where they've got a coach that knows what to do with him and a defense that is flying around that ball, as evidenced by their victory last week over Tampa Bay, 34-24. They are 3-0. Arizona is 3-0. They came back on Jacksonville last week, and we saw Jacksonville last night, 31-19. They are 3-0 as well. 49ers were down 17-0 to Green Bay. They came back, had a lead late, but left, I don't know. We'll get to that in a second, but I think people are too critical of the fact that they said they should have taken more time off. You're not guaranteed to score in the NFL. I said this on Monday. You're not guaranteed to score. You score when you have a chance to score, especially when you're behind. If you're ahead, then you kneel at the 1-yard line because then you can take the time off. And then the Seahawks defense in question, they lose to Minnesota. Russell Wilson, Metcalf, Lockett, Carson, all offensive guys are having good years for Seattle, but the defense very much in question as they are 1-2. A big game with the Niners this weekend. They don't want to fall to 1-3. And if they do win this weekend over the Niners, they will have the tiebreaker and they'll be ahead of San Francisco going into week 5. But right now, the Rams in Arizona, that's the big game this weekend, Charlie. 4:00 Eastern on Sunday afternoon, the Los Angeles Rams will host the Arizona Cardinals, Matthew Stafford, and Henderson, and Higbee, and Kupp, and Robert Woods, and the defense, Aaron Donald. You can't forget about Aaron Donald, the best defensive player in the NFL right now. Their linebackers are flying around. They totally, I wouldn't want to say they confused Tom Brady. It's hard to confuse Tom Brady, but they sure had a game plan for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last week, and they shut the running game down, and Tom Brady was under a ton of pressure last week, more than I've seen him be under pressure in the last few years. This is a very formidable team in the NFC West, the Los Angeles Rams are right now.
Yeah, it's amazing. First of all, for Matt Stafford, it's amazing what happens as a quarterback when you have a line. Yeah. All of a sudden, you're going from a guy with potential to a star. I mean, we always knew that. I mean, people badmouthed him. This guy has never lived up to his potential. Yeah, no, of course he didn't, because he never had a team around him. We knew this guy was talented. He just never had a team around him. He was playing for Detroit, for God's sake. And now he's got a team around him. He's got a better than good coach. Like you said, got a coach that knows what to do with him. And look what's happening. The guy is excelling. He's talented. He's doing all the things that he wants to do. And they made Tampa Bay was shell shocked.
Yeah.
I mean, they really were. I mean, in that second half, they broke them. And you don't see a team in the NFL that is good. I mean, you see bad teams in the NFL look shell-shocked, but you don't see good teams in the NFL look shell-shocked. And in that second half, Tampa Bay looked shell-shocked. And they were ready, and they had it going for them. And so the Rams right now, wow, what a scary team. But then you look at Arizona. Remember Arizona? Arizona was going to be the worst team in the West. As a matter of fact, their coach was going to get fired. Remember? That was all the preseason predict. Now, we didn't say that.
I might have. I still don't believe in Arizona.
Well, but you didn't say you weren't as bad as some of these guys.
No, not at all.
You know, some of these guys, they're terrible. The coach is going to get 3-0. Now, I'm not saying they're going to the Super Bowl. I'm not even saying they're going to win the division. But they're not a bad football team.
No.
They're not a bad football team. So I think they're playing a little better than I expected, but they're a good football team. The 49ers, let's talk about that play at the end of the game. I keep hearing people saying, well, they left too much time on the clock. Oh, for heaven's sakes, you've never coached.
How can you leave too much time on the clock? 37 seconds, no timeouts. Stop the ball.
You cannot take a chance. You cannot take a chance of running out of time.
Correct.
When you're down to that close on the clock, you got a chance to punch it in. You punch it in. I'm telling you, if you were to go back stats-wise and run all the scenarios through some supercomputer, everything would tell you punch that ball into the end zone. Because what Aaron Rodgers did was phenomenal. It was a thing of beauty. Enjoy it, because you're going to see it very rarely in the National Football League. And they deserved it. They deserved it. It was incredible. Enjoy it. That's what football's all about, is those kind of exciting moments. But you cannot fault the 49ers for punching the ball in too soon. That is just stupid. Yeah. I'm sorry. Anybody that says that, it's just stupid.
I got it. 49ers and the Buccaneers, similar in the scenarios that both their defensive secondaries have been decimated by injury, and Matthew Stafford took advantage of that. Jamal Dean, the cornerback for the Buccaneers, went out. Don't know how long he'll be out. They've already lost Murphy Bunting from opening week against the Cowboys as well, too. So I think that's the biggest problem right now for the 49ers, is their secondary is completely hurt, and they get in the position where they're going to go up against Russell Wilson. Offensively, there's not a lot of teams better than Seattle offensively right now, because Russell Wilson, and I know I have him on my fantasy football team, numbers-wise, he's putting up the numbers. They just can't stop anybody right now. And if the 49ers can establish some kind of running game this week, then maybe they've got a chance to go 3-1 against Seattle. The
problem is who's going to run the ball for the 49ers.
The problem is who's going to run the ball for the 49ers, and what's Garoppolo going to do on offense. It looks like Brandon Ayuk came out of his shell last week. Deebo Samuel has been great this year. To begin with, the 49ers are a 3-point favorite, 52. The Rams are 4.5 and 55 in the NFC West. All right, we move on from the NFC West on the Friday Football Show, the Make the Money and Run podcast with Vasu Vadaparty and Charlie O. We're here with you every Friday at 1 Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific to break down the National Football League. We will hit college football in the next segment, but right now we're going to finish up the NFC. Let's go to the NFC North. There's really not a lot to say in the NFC North right now. It's a bad division. Detroit, Chicago, Minnesota's played better the last few weeks, and I don't think a lot of people were overly shocked that they went in, that they were at home and beat Seattle. They were an underdog at home against Seattle, but I just thought Kirk Cousins the last 2 weeks against Arizona and Seattle had played really well. Dalvin Cook's status unknown this weekend. He wants to play, obviously, but he was out last week, and they still beat Seattle. But Cousins looks like he's throwing the ball around, and his receivers are good. Jefferson has been really good for them as well, too. Their problem is on defense as well. And I think they have Cleveland this weekend, too. So they're going to have to figure out how to stop the run, because Cleveland's number one deal is running the ball, even though they've got Beckham and Landry and Hooper tight end and all that too. But they've got to play defense against them, and they got to be able to establish a running game, and they've got to block. I mean, we say that about every team. They've got to block, because we just talked about the AFC with Myles Garrett and Jadeveon Clowney on that defensive line, and their linebackers are pretty good, and they are a formidable team, but they're a 2-point underdog. They're a 2-point underdog at home again, just like they were to Seattle last week. And then the Detroit Lions, boy, again, bad luck is better than no luck, I guess. But they're 0-3, and they have the who do they have? They have the Bears this weekend, and they're a 2-point underdog against the Bears in Chicago. The Bears, we talked about them in the game against Cleveland, 8 sacks. I don't know if Andy Dalton's going to start. Matt Nagy is probably pulling out whatever's left of his hair, trying to figure out, by the way, as our Bears fans too, by the way, speaking as one, trying to figure out what Dalton and Fields are going to do here in terms of this weekend. But you've got to get a win against Detroit. I'm sorry. You're 2-1 or 1-2. You got to go to 2-2 this week. You cannot fall that far back in the division. And then the Packers, they've got the Steelers this weekend. What Steelers team is going to show up? Their defense is not very good either. They let San Francisco back in that game. If Pittsburgh can establish some kind of running game and Roethlisberger has any connection with his receivers, the Packers, according to our line right here, is 6.5, and the total at somewhere around 45, I believe, is the line. That might be a lot for Pittsburgh. 6.5 in the NFL is a lot to begin with, and I know it's Aaron Rodgers and the way they came back last week, but this division is not very good. Green Bay, the class of it right now, but a loss by Green Bay and a win by the Bears, a win by the Vikings, and Detroit will be 0-4. I mean, I got a good feeling about Chicago this weekend. So I'm just saying the Packers and Bears are both going to be 2-2 if Pittsburgh can come in and play. Although there is a big disparity between the Packers and the Bears. I'm not unrealistic about that either, but that's the way the standings go, and you can only play who's ever in front of you, Charlie. The NFC North, thoughts?
Well, first of all, in that Packers-Pittsburgh game, let's be honest. The Steelers have broken the Walsh rule, and that is getting rid of a player too soon rather than too late. And they've stayed with Big Ben too long, and they should have cut ties 2 seasons ago.
Yeah, but I don't think they can block. I think their offensive line's not very good. If he's got time, he can still find his receivers. They've got receivers, Charlie. They've got Claypool. They've got.
I don't care if you've got receivers. You've got a quarterback who was done 2 seasons ago, and you stayed with him too long. So it's done there. They're toast. I don't know. I don't know if I like those numbers. I don't know that I would play that game with those numbers, but the Packers are a pretty good club, and I don't see that as much of a game. The Bears Lions game, yeah, the Bears better win that game. And I don't think if they've got to play Fields, I don't think it'll be the same kind of game this week.
Better not be.
but Nagy better be packing the office. Okay, let's just be honest. This is it. It's done. And if it's not done, Bears fans better be putting bags on their heads and turning in their season tickets. Okay, because that the Nagy experiment has not worked. And there's got to be somebody out there that can come into Chicago and run that club. I mean, they've got some talent there. The only thing I'm worried about now is you got Fields, who's obviously got some talent, and I'm worried he's going to be one of those guys they've thrown in there, and they're going to wipe him out before he has a chance to blossom. I mean, when you got a guy that comes in and winds up with 1 net yard in his first start, I mean, you talk about wanting to work on a guy's head. You know, he's a national champion one year and then winds up in his first start with 1 net yard. That will screw up your head.
No doubt about it.
Screw up your head.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
So, I mean, you know, you look at that division, it's the Packers. Everybody else is just trying to figure out what they're doing and trying not to get injured. I mean, that's plain and simple. That's
all right. Moving on to the NFC South. We'll hit the NFC East in a second, and then after the break, we'll get the college football set up for Saturday as well. Good game last night between Virginia and Miami. We'll get to that in the ACC. Cowboys dominated last week. Oh, I'm sorry, that's the East right there. But the NFC South, the Saints. What do we make of the Saints? They go into Miami. They beat up on Miami. 28-13, the final score. We know that not Miami. I'm sorry. They beat up on who did they beat up on? They beat up on somebody last week, but they went in and ended up winning that game. They were an underdog going into that game, and they end up winning that game. They are playing pretty well in the division right now. The NFC South has them at 2-1, Tampa Bay 2-1 after their loss to the Rams.
Patriots 28-13.
Oh, 28-13, right? Okay, and then Carolina. I mean, they're not going to have McCaffrey for 4 weeks. This is Chuba Hubbard from Oklahoma State. He's run the ball pretty well, but in terms of the in terms of the offense right now, it's going to be very limited without Christian McCaffrey. We know what kind of player Christian McCaffrey is. Fantasy football drafts will tell you what kind of player Christian McCaffrey is. And I saw him play at Stanford. We all saw him play at Stanford. They're playing. Who do they have this week? They have the Cowboys this week. They're going to the Cowboys. We'll get to the NFC East in a second. But they're 3-0 with that McCaffrey going in. Sam Darnold's off to a good start. Their defense is really good. If they can figure out how to stop the run, I don't know what's wrong with Elliott. Last 2 years, he hasn't run the ball very well. They've gotten Pollard in there involved a little bit. But right now, Dak Prescott looks unbelievable. And they're going to have to figure out how to shut down the offense through the quarterback with their secondary and their linebacker play, because right now Dallas is humming on offense.
Yeah, Brett, because they're going to have to pay so much attention to him. But I think they're doing a good job right now of working without him there. Can they keep that up? For Carolina fans, you hope so. The Cowboys, yeah, Dak all of a sudden is saying, hey, you're paying me the big bucks, I'll earn my big bucks. And good for him. Good for him. I mean, that's especially after coming back from that injury. You want nothing but the best. What's happening with Zeke? I don't know. They'll work that out. I think one of the things that will help him is now that Dak is looking like he's going to excel like that. A good passing game can open up a good running game. You know, it works both ways. A good running game will open up a passing game. A passing game can open up a running game. I hear a lot about Pollard. I think they're putting too much into that. I really do. You know, I've heard, I've listened to a little bit of Dallas radio, and the fans are, let's start Pollard over. They're not going to start. Come on, stop.
But he has a good change of pace back for them on third down. So,
well, yeah, but okay, but you know, we got a lot of good change of pace.
Right.
Backs. That's okay. That doesn't mean Zeke's not a good running back. We use those kind of things all the time. Zeke's going to be fine, and he's going to have a breakout game. And when it does, it's going to be ugly for the other team, because once he breaks out, he's going to chug and go. So, the Cowboys will be fine.
Could be a tough week for the Carolina Panthers with no McCaffrey. Let's look at the schedule. The Falcons coming off their win last week against the Giants on a game-winning kick by my kickers. Koo wins at 17-14 over the Giants. The Giants will go to New Orleans this weekend. They will play at New Orleans with Jameis Winston at quarterback. The Saints a 7-point favorite, 42 the total against the Giants. And this game that's going to happen in New England on Sunday night, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers coming off what considerably could be their worst loss of probably the last couple of years, is going to go in, and they're going to see an old friend. The New England Patriots are going to see an old friend in number 12 and Tom Brady and Bill Belichick on the other sidelines. There's been a little promotion about it. I'm sure you've heard about this game going to be on Sunday night.
Really?
A little bit, Charlie.
I don't know much about it.
I don't know that much about it. Well, Tom Brady going in at 2-1 against a very decimated Patriots team right now, 1-2, have not looked good. Mac Jones, the replacement for Tom Brady. The Cam Newton experiment was just an experiment. We knew there was going to be another quarterback coming in, and that's Mac Jones right now. So here we are, Tampa Bay going in as a 7-point favorite into New England. New England's defense has been okay. They got beat up by the Saints last week, and Tampa Bay, of course, we know what happened with the Rams. I got a bad feeling for New England that they're going to be laser focused after this Rams loss last week. And if they can get their secondary back, I don't think the secondary is threatening enough for this. The Buccaneers secondary is threatening enough for Mac Jones, even with injuries, to be able to beat them by himself. They're going to need to do a lot of things to beat Tampa Bay, because that's a mad team right now, coming off of last week with the Rams. They were favored going into the week until Sunday, when it ended up as a pick'em against the Rams. And you can see what the Rams have that the Buccaneers do not have right now. What the Buccaneers didn't have last week, I got a bad feeling that the Patriots don't have this week to counteract the Tampa Bay attack, Charlie.
Brady would be walking around the locker room anyway saying, we're not going to Foxborough and losing. I will kill anyone that doesn't play well there. Okay. You think the trophy being tossed across the channel was bad? I will toss you across the channel. But now that they're coming off that loss, the poor Patriots, Mac Jones on and all those things, sorry guys, this is going to be ugly. I mean, seriously, I expect this game to be over pretty early. I really do. because I think they're just going to go in there and say, we can't mess around, guys. Let's get this one done early. I think Brady would be very happy to, at the end of the third quarter, go, thank you very much. It's nice to be here, and I'll be on the bench now. If you need an autograph, I'll just walk around the stadium and sign autographs. I think he would be very happy to do that because for two reasons. One is they need to reestablish themselves, and number two, I think he would just love to be able to do that and sit down and don't, all this thing about, hey, he doesn't like Belichick. Belichick doesn't like him. Stop it. That's
Actually,
all.
it's probably true. They probably don't like each other after all those years together.
Who cares?
Well, somebody does.
They're big men. They're both millionaires. Just stop it.
Somebody does. It's a story.
It's they're fine. They're fine.
All right, we move on to the NFC East here before we take a break and hit the college football circuit. Washington loses to Buffalo last week. They've got the Falcons. Talked about the Cowboys dominating the Eagles. The Eagles will have the Chiefs this weekend. Who's the other team in the NFC East? Philadelphia will have the Chiefs this weekend. The Cowboys will have the Panthers, and then the Eagles have the Chiefs. NFC East, not the greatest division in the world. We saw that last year, Charlie. It looks like the Cowboys and Prescott coming back. You mentioned that. But anybody else could have challenged. I can't see Washington or the Giants or Philadelphia challenge them. I thought Philadelphia might have had a shot to challenge them, but clearly last week that was a clear domination by Dallas right now. The NFC East going into week 4 looks to be a Dallas division even this early in the season.
Yeah, it really does. And I mean, I don't think that's bad for football. We laugh a lot of times when we talk about Dallas being America's team. But in a lot of ways it is, and it's not bad for the NFL for Dallas to do well. And I think it will be fine. I think it's really bad for the NFL to have two teams in New York City that just suck. And the other team that's in that division is the Giants, and they're 0-3, and they're going to New Orleans. So they're probably going to be 0-4. So you're going to probably have two teams in New York City, your number one market, that are 0-4, which is an embarrassment. I don't know if you saw it. Probably didn't. I always like to look at the New York Post online after games in New York because they have one of the most colorful sports sections ever. And somebody snuck up on the this section at Giant stadiums where Wellington Mara boxes are, and he had gone down the line and knocked over all of the trash cans. They have these beautiful trash cans. He had knocked them all down because he was
frustrated. So his trash cans do what he wants with them. So the NFC East, one of the big things there as well. All right, that's going to wrap it up for the football. Let's hit the game lines real quick. We talked about the game lines a little bit, the point spreads. This week, it's going to be as I get it up here real quick, not that one. Oops. Not that one. Here we go. This one. Washington, a 1-point favorite over Atlanta. Chicago, Detroit. Tennessee at the Jets, giving 7.44. The Cleveland Browns are at Minnesota, 2.5 and 51.5. Miami, a 2-point favorite over Indianapolis. At home, Dallas, 4.5 over Carolina, 50.5. Be interested to see that one. That might be, if Carolina's defense comes through, that might be a good underplay, but Dallas's offense on fire right now. Saints 7.5, 42 over the Giants. Kansas City going to Philadelphia, Andy Reid's old stomping grounds, -7, 54.5. And Buffalo 16 and 47 over Houston. Charlie, the early games, your thoughts?
It's a little early in the week yet for me. I tend to be a Sunday morning, late Saturday night, early Sunday.
But what are you looking for? What interests you from just a game standpoint? I guess is the best way to do it.
I don't know. There's not a lot that really interests me all that much this weekend. To be honest with you, I'm interested in Chiefs Eagles just because it's a return of Andy Reid. I'm interested in Seahawks 49ers because I think that's an important game to both of them, and I'm interested in that Monday night Raiders Chargers game because I think that's got a lot of play because of the division.
Dallas, Carolina will be one in the morning that I'll be interested in it. I want to see how good Minnesota is. regarding Cleveland, or I take that back. I want to see how Cleveland is regarding their division standing, because they did lose a game early in the year to Kansas City that they could have won. They could have been 3-0, and that probably amplifies Kansas City's problems more, because Cleveland had a big lead in that game as well.
Oh, and I'm sorry, I left it out too. That Cardinals-Rams game.
Yeah.
I mean, that's going to be huge.
Cardinals, Rams, all the afternoon games and the night game will be really good. Monday night will be really good as well too. Rams and Cardinals, 49ers and Seahawks in the division. Denver, I'll be interested to see how Baltimore comes into Denver, only a 1-point favorite, and then Green Bay and Pittsburgh in the afternoon we'll see. And then Tampa Bay 7 at New England. The Chargers 3.5, 51.5 on Monday night. All right, when we come back, we're going to take 10 minutes and hit the college football scene. A lot of big games, conference play this weekend in college football. We're going to run a little overtime today, but that's okay. We need to get the college football in because it's a big Saturday with conference play. Back in 30 seconds with the Friday football show. Vasi Vadaparty, Charlie O, the Make the Money and Run podcast, sponsored by Britannia Arms of Cupertino. So much information to get into. We're going to run over a little bit the normal hour that we have, the Friday football show with Vasi Vadaparty, Charlie O, on the Make the Money and Run podcast, Mondays, Thursdays, and Fridays, as well as updates every day by 6 o'clock Eastern during the week, 11 a.m. on Saturdays and noon on Sundays for NFL and college kickoffs as well. All right, let's go to college here. ACC, that line was up there from yesterday. Miami did lose to Virginia 30-26. A tough one for Miami. They are having a rough year. North Carolina lost to Georgia Tech last week. Georgia Tech's still an underdog at home to Pittsburgh. UNC is a 20-point favorite over Duke. Wake Forest has played pretty well. They've got 7 points. They're given to Louisville. Florida State's awful. Syracuse is not very much better. And Clemson, first time out of the top 10 in years, 14.5 and 45.5 over BC. Quick ACC thoughts, Charlie.
Wow. I love a wide open ACC. It's interesting though. I was doing just a little bit of reading last night, and the ACC looks like they could be shut out from the college football playoffs. There's just no one right now that looks like they may be able to break through with the criteria that's there to be a part of that, which is really pretty shocking because we're so used to having Clemson in there. It looks like they could be shut out this year.
They're top 25 in the country. First time they've been out of the top 10 in weeks, especially after going 3 straight championship games, winning one of them back in the Deshaun Watson days when they were very formidable. Trevor Lawrence as well, part of that group as well the last couple of years. Moving on to the Big 12, Texas at TCU. Texas dropped 70 last week. I can't figure Texas out in the Big 12. 5-65 at TCU. Oklahoma, they had a tough game with West Virginia. It was one of my favorite picks, was taking West Virginia last week in the Big 12. They lost by 3, but covered a 17.5-point spread. They're at Kansas State, West Virginia. Those Mountaineers 7.5, 55 against Texas Tech. Oklahoma State coming off of 2 victories in a row, one on Boise State, one on Kansas State. They're going to go to Baylor, who upset Iowa State last week at home. Oklahoma State favored 3.5, 47. They're at home against Baylor. And then Iowa State, mad again like they did to poor UNLV a few weeks ago. They lose last week to Baylor, and now they're going to be given 34 to Kansas as well. The Big 12, a lot of offense, Charlie, but not very much defense. And right now it looks like Oklahoma still, they're struggling offensively, but their defense has played well. So right now it looks like Oklahoma. But boy, that Red River shootout is going to be very interesting because if Texas is dropping all these points down, 70 points, 56 another week, and Oklahoma can't keep up scoring wise, I don't know if this is a definite Big 12 Oklahoma division for conference.
Well, I'll tell you, Vasu, I hate Oklahoma. I always do. I've hated them since I was a kid. I think it's that Bula Bula thing. I don't know what it is. That song, I get that thing in my head and I just can't get it out. But when it comes to the Big 12, don't ever discount Oklahoma.
Right.
I just, They have ways. They just have ways. And I know Texas is just blowing up. I know they're just blowing up. But when they have to face Oklahoma, I don't think they're going to be the same team. I don't think Oklahoma is going to let them be the same team. And if you made me right now put money down on who's going to win the Big 12, I'd put my money on Oklahoma. I really would, just because I think they're a great program, and they find a way to win. And I think that they're going to be the team that's going to be in the college football playoffs out of the Big 12.
No doubt. All right, we move on to the Big Ten here. We got a game tonight in the Big Ten, Iowa, Maryland. Iowa's sure not to be really, really good in the Big Ten. It's going to be interesting to see that defense against an Ohio State team later on down the road. I don't know if they play each other or not, but Maryland has shown some gumption as well, too. A 3-point favorite for Iowa. At Maryland, Wisconsin, and Michigan, another big game. Wisconsin offensively, they're challenged right now, and Michigan is playing really well, although I don't think Michigan's competition has been very good. 243.5. Illinois has got UNC Charlotte in a non-conference game. Purdue, we thought their offense was going to be better. They did nothing last week in the game that we had against Illinois, -11 for both of us, and it did not come out. 2.5, 47.5 for Minnesota. Ohio State going to Rutgers, who's pretty good. They gave Michigan a tough game, 14.5 on the road, 58.5. Penn State has Indiana. That's the game of the night, according to ABC and ESPN, 12.5, 53.5. Indiana's really struggled this year to start. And then Michigan State has 11 and 64.5 with Western Kentucky, another non-conference game. And Nebraska, those Nebraska Cornhuskers, they played Oklahoma tough. They've had a pretty good year so far. -12 and 51.5 against what I think is a pretty disappointing Northwestern team.
Yeah.
After 2 or 3 weeks coming in, Charlie. You know the Big Ten really well, Charlie.
Yeah. The one thing, Vasu, that I think is very interesting is that, everybody had Jim Harbaugh gone. Hey, Jim, go find someplace else to be. And all of a sudden, he's got a Wolverine team that's undefeated 4 weeks in, and I think they will still be undefeated 5 weeks in. Wisconsin, a team that's in disarray. And so sorry, Kayla, I hate to tell you that, but that's I think that's just going to be the situation. Michigan play. I mean, I know their competition has been real tough. But nonetheless, a program that was in disarray that seems to be coming together. I think they're pretty well going. Yeah, Purdue, what a disappointment. We had bigger expectations from them. I am interested in this Ohio State Rutgers game.
Yeah, me too.
Because Rutgers, you're right. Rutgers gave Michigan way more than I thought they were going to have. And by the way, just a little aside, Rutgers doing well in the Big Ten is a big deal because Rutgers is the state university for New Jersey, and that's the New York City market. And that is big. That is a big deal for the Big Ten. So anyway, that's it. Business aside, move on.
Michigan, Wisconsin will be a big game tonight. I'm interested to see how Iowa's 6th in the country. I think they're 6th in the country, if I read it right. 5th in the country right now in the AP rankings, and they're very good. And I don't know if Maryland has the offense, but I don't know if they have the defense to hold on. But Iowa's
Little Tua will be interested to watch. He's got 1,340 yards and 10 TDs already.
Yes, their offense is really good, and they've put up a lot of points this year already in the Big Ten and non-conference play. The Pac-12, USC, boy, they're going to Colorado. They are not very good. Colorado's not very good. They're still 7.5-point favorite. They don't know what the quarterback situation is between Slovis and Dart's out. He's the one that came back against Washington State 2 weeks ago, 7.5, 51 at Colorado. Cal, 7.5, 51.5 against Washington State. Oregon State, 2.5 and 57.5 against Washington, who's been a disappointment. In the 2 big games of the conference, UCLA -3 at home, 55.5. That game at 10:30 Eastern on Fox Sports 1 tomorrow. And then the big one in the conference is at Stanford, and they play Oregon very tough at home, even though Oregon is a much better team, and they're right there. Oregon 8, 57.5 at Stanford tomorrow afternoon. That's the big game on ABC tomorrow afternoon. Pac-12, Charlie, it's been better, but I don't know if it's better than it was the last few years from a defensive standpoint. A lot more competition. UCLA, Oregon, Arizona State right now at the top. Disappointed in USC. Oregon State has played pretty well as well, too. But right now it looks like UCLA and Oregon, the top 2 teams. And if those 2 teams met up in a Pac-12 championship game, North and South, that'd be a very interesting matchup right now. But I will be interested to see how Stanford holds up against this Oregon team because they've played some really good games, and then there have been some really bad games. I don't think they'll cover, but I think they'll play Oregon tough, and it's going to be a late fourth quarter cover for Oregon in this game. And I do think UCLA will cover against Arizona State.
Well, as a conference, everybody needs to get down on their hands and knees and pray for Oregon, because if they have a chance for the Pac-12 to get anybody into the college football playoffs, percentage-wise, everybody says Oregon's the only team that has a chance.
Right.
The only team. So they need them to do very well. And hi, Nick, I see it. You're absolutely right. They are the only ones that have a chance to do that. So they need to do that. And especially because USC has made the rest of the conference look like a joke. That move that they made to blow that team up after week 2 makes the rest of the conference look like a joke. I'm sorry, it does.
Yeah.
So Oregon is the one and only hope for this conference. So they need to do well. But I think this could be a good game. It all depends on which Stanford team shows up. I think Oregon will win. What's the line you have? Your lines are always better.
Oregon -8, 57.5. Oregon, obviously they've covered. They went. Their defense is a lot better than it's been the last few years because they went into Ohio State and really crushed them. They played a little bit down to Arizona last week. They were a 28-point favorite, but they won by 22, but that's Arizona. And that game was over in the middle of the third quarter anyway. And UCLA, they have that. They're not going to have a chance at the championship because they lost to Fresno State early in the year. So -3 and 55.5. Arizona State plus come out like a house of cards, and they haven't played very well either to begin with. So that'll be an interesting game tomorrow night. That's late night.
Hey, Nick's watching on Facebook. Nick, do you like that -8 with the Ducks?
Yeah, go ahead and send us a banner back, Nick. Absolutely. All right, let's move on to the SEC here. Give me an interesting Pac-12 weekend. The SEC, we'll have that in a second. The SEC, Georgia coming off a 62-0 win. I'm fascinated by this game. Early game on CBS, noon Eastern, 18.5 points. Their front seven is all NFL ready is Georgia. The way they took on Vanderbilt last week, 48.5 the total. Arkansas coming off their win against Texas A&M on the road. Georgia's 18.5 points. That too many for Arkansas, Charlie?
Wow. Vasu, everything that I'm reading says no.
Yeah.
You know, everybody likes Arkansas, but nobody likes Arkansas that much. You know, as a matter of fact, what I've been reading is that everybody kind of feels like Arkansas it may be ranked a little too high.
That was a big win though against Texas A&M. Granted, it was a neutral field last week.
Oh yeah, and that's why they're there. And you know, I was just absolutely loving seeing Jimbo suffer on the sidelines because I don't like
Casey. Absolutely,
I don't like him one bit. So watching him have to stand over there and get beat just did my heart so good. That was my favorite thing of the weekend. But everything I'm reading just says this is going to be Georgia's game, and that everybody thinks Georgia's going to win big time. By the way, just a quick aside:
JT Daniels going to come back and start for Georgia this week too.
Nick says that the Ducks can cover that -8.5, and he really loves the first half -4.5. So there we go. And
we'll have Nick back on next week.
Spot on for us this season.
Yeah, we'll have Nick back next week as well too. Interesting games for me in the SEC. Georgia, Arkansas won. Alabama, the total is 79.5 at Ole Miss. They're going to go to Ole Miss. I'm sorry, they're hosting. Are they hosting Ole Miss? Yeah, they're hosting Ole Miss at home. Alabama, 14.5. They had the tough game with Florida last a week ago or 2 weeks ago. And here's Mississippi coming in with all cylinders firing on that offense. 79.5, Charlie. I mean, this is Alabama's defense that's getting run over. We saw what Florida did to them. Florida has Kentucky this week. Kentucky's defense at Kentucky. They're very good defense. And Florida's still laying 8.5 at Kentucky. And then the other one in the SEC, and I'll let you go at it after this, but LSU and Auburn, it seems to be an interesting game to me because Auburn had a tough game last week against Georgia State. They finally came back and won. And then LSU held off Mississippi State on the road as a 1.5-point favorite. They're 3.5-point favorites over Auburn coming into this weekend. But the Alabama-Mississippi game, the LSU-Auburn game, the Georgia-Arkansas game, and the Florida-Kentucky game, the four games that I'm looking at this weekend. Even Texas A&M, Mississippi State a little bit. It's only 7 and 45.5. Mississippi State with a very good defense. And Those are really the 4, maybe 5 games that I'd be interested in the SEC. Defense has been optional in the SEC. We used to joke about that in the Pac-12 the last few years, but this year it's been very optional in terms of shutting teams down. Georgia has the best defense, and maybe that's the way that they're going to shut down Alabama if they end up playing each other in the SEC championship or in the national championship. Or I don't even know if they play each other this year at all, but I'd be very fascinated to see how Alabama comes out against this high-powered Ole Miss offense, because their defense has been so-so, and that showed against Florida. They may have taken the gas off a little bit against Florida, but the fact is that they almost lost that game, and that does not sit well in Tuscaloosa with anybody there. So Ole Miss coming in 79.5 the total, 14.5. I mean, do we take Mississippi here? I don't know. It's on the road at Alabama. That's a lot of points, but boy, that's Alabama at home too.
Well, I'm looking at that over and under, and I may take the over, but I may have to buy a half point.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a long-standing joke.
That's a long-standing joke.
We're not going to try to explain that. Vasu, I'm looking at a number right now on some of my stats. Nick is 23-0 against his former coaches on his coaching tree.
Mm-hmm.
But man, those are some huge numbers.
Yeah.
Those are some huge numbers. And I've got to think about that. I just don't know. 79.5. I mean, I know that there's been no defense in the SEC, but man, that's
our podcast minutes on the weekend. We do it 3 times on Saturday at 11, at 3 o'clock, and then at 6:30 to get all the windows of the games on Saturday. And then we do one at noon on Sunday before the early kickoffs, and then at 3:30 for the later kickoffs as well for the rest of the day on Sunday. So 3 times on Saturday, thrice the fun, and twice the fun on Sunday for us, with the 3 times the fun on Saturday, 2 times the fun on Sunday as well too. Last game we'll talk about before we close it out here in the American Conference, the Cincinnati Bearcats, who were off last weekend. In fact, that we have the other games on there, but there's really only one game in that conference. It's not a conference game. They are going to be playing at Notre Dame. Notre Dame comes off their big win against Wisconsin last week, and Cincinnati goes into the Golden Dome house as a favorite, a 1.5-point favorite. Desmond Ridder, that defense is really good. 50.5. Brian Kelly's former team, the Cincinnati Bearcats, that elevated him into the position of Notre Dame head coach. By the way, I think he has the most wins now as Notre Dame head coach all time. But Cincinnati, is this, I don't know, Charlie, this is a little disrespect for Notre Dame. They came off a big win. Cincinnati is really good. Well, maybe, I don't know, but minus 1.5 for Cincinnati. I'm kind of thinking that Notre Dame, they can run the ball. I've seen Cincinnati a lot this year, and their defense is really good. And Desmond Ridder is really good at quarterback for Cincinnati. It's 2:30 Eastern on NBC tomorrow. But the fact is that that's going to be a barn burner to me. That might be the best game of the day coming tomorrow at 2:30.
Well, it's got a lot of the right elements. I mean, you've got your former coach there, and so that plays in, even though none of those kids were there when he played, that it's still that element there. It is Notre Dame, but what is Notre Dame? I think they've won 45 home games in a row.
Yeah,
if I
barely
remember.
A lot of those not covering either, like the 2 weeks ago. Yeah, Toledo, that played Akron.
Listen, I don't like Brian Kelly.
I know you said that.
I don't. I mean, he's the winningest coach in Notre Dame history, and what has he won? Nothing.
So you think his former team comes into South Bend and beats them?
Man, nothing would do my heart good, because I think that would finally get him out of there, because I don't like him. I never liked him. I don't like his style, and all the resources he's had, he should have won a national championship by now. And when you have all those wins and you haven't won a national championship at Notre Dame, you don't deserve to be the coach at Notre Dame. And I used to live in South Bend, folks, so I feel pretty strongly about this. But will Cincinnati go in there and win tomorrow? No, they won't.
Really? Okay. Well, I'm surprised that they're favored, so we'll see how it goes. But like I said, 2:30 Eastern, all TVs will be tuned there. A lot of good college football tomorrow. Of course, NFL on Sunday as well, too. We're here every Mondays, Thursdays, and Fridays. This is the Friday football show. Asivada Party Charlie O and the Make the Money and Run podcast, sponsored by Britannia Arms. Check them out at BritanniaArmsDeanza.com. If you're in Silicon Valley or in the Bay Area, 408-252 7262. All the TV set up for Sunday for football as well, too. And don't forget to check our social media posts out at 6 Eastern every day, Monday through Friday. Like I said, 3 times on Saturday, 11 o'clock, 3:30, and 11 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and 6:30 on Saturdays, and then noon and 3:30 on Sundays for the early and later windows of the NFL, as well as Saturday for college football too. All right, week 4 of the NFL, week 5 of college football. That's going to do it for us. Charlie O, Vasi Vadaparty, the Friday football show on the Make the Money and Run podcast for Friday, October 1st, 2020. Thanks to everybody on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter, on our new Twitter feed, live feed that we have. And if you missed any of it, please pass it on to everybody and download and subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. Have a great weekend. Good luck with all your games. And we will talk to you on Monday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon for the Make the Money and Run podcast. Don't forget the podcast minute coming at 6 o'clock on social media. Take care, everybody.